afternoon, and good evening, because we're not quite sure where you're coming from. But we are all here, happy to see you all on our weekly Wednesday webcast on behalf of the Montessori Foundation, the International Montessori Council, and now the new collaborative Montessori response team. We are here to join with you today in looking at some ways that we can talk to children when grown-ups are scared. And I have to say, we're mostly talking to grown-ups who are scared every day. And so we want to acknowledge that. We want to welcome you here today. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. We're all sort of changing our way of life from minute to minute, from day to day, and trying to keep ourselves in check, right? How do we take care of ourselves? We all just practiced a nice collective deep breath. I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that as well. And sometimes just smiling, thinking about something that we're grateful for. I know for me, I'm very grateful for the colleagues I've been blessed to work with, and for those of you who we've been in contact with almost nonstop in communication with. I'm very grateful for our Montessori community at a time like this when the world is in a crisis situation, and we have the presence of mind to come together and help each other. So I just want to express my gratitude to all for that, and for my wonderful panel today, who I'll be introducing shortly. I see people are still logging in. Luckily, we are not hitting our 100-person max, because this GoToWebinar platform can handle up to 3,000 people. What it doesn't do is give us the opportunity for face-to-face interaction. And so, you know, it has some limitations. I am going to announce to all of you that we do have confirmation that our Zoom account has been upgraded to 500 people. It should be active by our next meeting. And so we are going to be testing that out prior to our next meeting, which right now the next scheduled town hall meeting is about the navigating the economic impact to schools. And that will be at 4 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, Thursday, March 19th. We will continually send you out. We're going to be having meetings of some sort every day. So we'll continue to send things out to update you, as well as post them on our website at montessori.org. So I know you didn't want to come on to log on to hear me talk about all of that, but that's part of the process. I want to remind everyone today's session is being recorded and will be posted. Normally these recordings are only available to IMC members. We will be making this more publicly available because we feel like this is a topic that everyone can benefit from as soon as possible. So I'd like to start today by introducing several of my colleagues and friends. I'm going to start on who's on my bottom. I'm not sure what order you're in, but on my bottom here is Tanya Reiskin, who's the Associate Head of School at Newgate School, and also is a Senior Consultant with the Montessori Foundation. Tanya, thanks for being here today. And then next I have Jonathan Wolf, also Senior Consultant with the Montessori Foundation, longtime Montessori, not only consultant, but also author and poet and so many other things that I could continue to talk about, but most of you know John, so thanks for being here today, John. Next, I have Vaiju Kadambi, and I'm so happy that Vaiju is here with us today. Vaiju also is a head of school, and so she's right there in the trenches with everyone else, trying to navigate all of these situations. But Vaiju also has some special skills that we thought would be so appropriate today. Her background in mindfulness particularly is part of what, and her background as a positive discipline instructor. I think both of those really bring some unique skill sets that we are so happy, Vaiju, that you've taken time to share with us today. And then last but certainly not least is Christine Lowrey. Christine's going to kind of be leading us through this conversation today, and our panel will, we'll make it interactive. We would love to hear from each of you, have the opportunity to post in the question box, which is about halfway down on your, halfway down on your control panel. I am seeing several people who saying they cannot hear or see us. So I would say, could people log in and tell us if they can hear or see us so we can answer Denise on this?
And I'll be right back while you're doing that.
Okay, thank you. She must be able to hear us now. Okay, that's terrific. Christine will be right back. I just want to tell you a little bit about Christine. She's also a consultant with the Montessori Foundation, has been doing some courses with us. So many of you are familiar with most everybody on the panel. You'll continue to see us pretty much almost every day. We'll be like your new next door neighbors, kind of like, I don't know, Mr. Rogers. It's going to be here now. And we're going to have, we're going to try to keep this as interactive as we can and also as light as it can. This is a very heavy time. We don't want to underestimate the seriousness of the fact that the world is in crisis. We understand that. And at the same time, we know we have to take care of ourselves because we have so many other people to take care of and are counting on us and counting on our leadership. The children are counting us, the families are counting on us, the teachers are counting on us, our communities are counting on us. So while we understand the seriousness of this, we also hold in our hearts that we all have to breathe together, stay together, and support each other. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Christine to kind of get us started. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Welcome everyone who is here today. I hope that we have parents and educators and anybody who is interested in children. Ultimately, what we're talking about today is how we are supporting our children at this time. But as Kathy said, we can't easily support children, or as easily support children, if we're not also caring for ourselves. So this idea that, yes, we need to acknowledge how we're feeling. We all have this mix of feelings, right? And getting in touch with those, being aware of those, accepting that we're going to have those is a really good starting point. So I think all acknowledging together that there's a lot of uncertainty that we're all feeling. Uncertainty leads to panic oftentimes, and we're hearing a lot from the Montessori community and beyond about just this urgency to do something as a way of maybe tamping down that panic a little bit. But I think if we can acknowledge that and maybe even sit with it a little bit, it gives us an opportunity to then, when we support our children, when we work with our children, to know where we're coming from. Do any of you want to add anything to that before we go on?
No, the only thing that I would add is, as we're taking care of ourselves and as we're allowing it, we also get to move through it for the sake of our children. We can't get stuck in the allowing it.
Right.
And we get to recognize when that's happening. We kind of have to move through it now for the sake of the child and for our own mental health.
So
Christine.
I'm sorry, Tana. Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay. I'd like to add one thing coming from the perspective of watching faculty try to handle their own emotions, that I'd like to invite us to be mindfulness of the walk of integrity and honesty that some of us are going to have to walk when people are miscommunicating or using information inappropriately. Or incorrectly, that, we all have to have grace for the compassion of others. And that's part of the mindfulness piece that I know we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Tanya. And I think one of the things that John and I had talked about when we were working through this was the importance of having compassion for ourselves. And so this idea of, some of you have maybe have heard the term self-regulation. Really, that's just looking at how do we acknowledge our own feelings? How do we recognize those what's triggering those feelings. What are the external stresses? What are the internal stresses? Maybe even where are we feeling this stress in our bodies? So that the more that we become aware, the more mindful we are of that, we then move, as Viju is saying, we then move into what do we do with all of that? We can't just get wound up in our own feelings and our own tight stomach and our headache and that. We have to be able to move beyond that by having some techniques that we can use. So this idea that we have to self-regulate, particularly when we're talking about this topic today of how are we going to approach our children, we have to be able to co-regulate. So really what that means is when we have ourselves in a place where we can be calm, where we can be peaceful, we've done some of our own internal work, really of, as I said,
Okay,
looking at the triggers, looking at the stresses that we're under, how we're feeling with all of this.
Okay,
In order to,
No, go ahead and finish, Christine. Sorry.
okay, you know, that's where we have to start. So I'll let John say, and I'm not here, I don't know if Tim's trying to talk to us or.
I'm talking to somebody else.
Okay, all right. So, you know, we might spend a little bit of time just talking about, so how do I self-regulate? You know, it could be an entire course, and we're not going to do that today, but just to get ourselves in the framework of what does this feel like, we might talk about one or two little techniques. John?
I just want to add to your well-taken points, Christine. You know, there's an individual or personal part of self-regulation. How do I notice my own symptoms of stress? And do I do some mind, body, something to reboot myself? But people are so isolated today. I think one of the roles of school leaders is online, bringing their teachers together, not only to plan what you're going to deliver in terms of curriculum and communications to parents, but just asking, how is everybody? Does anybody want to talk about what they're feeling? Hey, let's do some deep breathing together. So I think also bringing people together and inviting them in groups to self-care, self-regulate is a very, very powerful tool that leaders need to use as a counterbalance to all the other stuff that needs to go on for the sake of the children in the school.
Exactly. And that's where and that really is what co-regulation is all about, is how do we start with ourselves? And as you say, as a school leader, part of our work might be to help our faculty understand how to self-regulate, and even just what is self-regulation? What does that even mean? And why is it important? It's important because as we interact with one another, many of you have heard of mirror neurons. You know, it's not going to be a neuroscience lesson, but we have mirror neurons, and we tend to, almost in an unconscious way, we tend to mimic the interactions that we're having with other people. As a really simple experiment, you can, I was going to say walk down the street, but we're not walking down the street anymore, but smiling online, and what happens, you see Viju starts smiling, Tanya starts smiling, Jonathan starts smiling. That's that co-regulation piece that is so important, particularly now in this extraordinary time. It's especially important when we're talking with children. So, you know, you've decided maybe that you need to have the conversation, or you want to have the conversation with your child or your students. The first thing, again, is we talk about the prepared environment. We need to talk about the prepared adult. So even something as simple as taking a few minutes to do some really deep breathing, or maybe breathe 10 deep breaths and counting while you're doing that. Those can be very, very centering, calming, preparing yourself activities to do. We will be with this collaborative, one of our task forces that we have is a self-care team. And we'll be talking about a lot of what is this and how do we do it? How do we care for ourselves? Besides the panel, and some of you might have other things to say about this idea of co-regulating, preparing ourselves to have the kind of interaction that we want to be able to have with other people, and knowing that our self-calm will be reflected in them. So maybe some of you have some comments that you would like to make about that. And I'm wondering if any of the group of you who are on this call today, please, please, please use the chat box. We are very serious about, we want this to be, you can see us, we can't see you, but we can see your words. So please put those in the chat box.
I want to say one thing also, Christine. One of the biggest steps, I want to say one more thing. Can you hear me? Okay. I think one of the biggest things we need to do when we're doing that self-care is really making sure our news channels are off. That is one of the biggest triggers for increasing our stress today. So if you are in the mindset of wanting to prepare yourself emotionally to have a difficult conversation, don't try to have the news media on in the background. Don't turn off social media, turn off anything that's going to change that energy to be a more negative one. I recognize I had watched, we've gotten rid of cable TV in our home, and I recognized I watched cable TV one day. I'm like, oh my God, I was really down. And I said, okay, no more again. You can only take it in small doses. So just be mindful of how much the media really affects your emotional level.
And as we're talking about preparing a more regulated environment and having a regulated conversation with our children, and since you brought that up at this point, Baiju, both John and I had the experience of teaching shortly after 9/11. Some of the things that my young children, my 3-year-olds, my 2.5-year-olds, came in saying, because they had been exposed to what was on television. They had heard the adults talking. They didn't know how to process any of that. So one thing that just in general we want to be really thoughtful of is limiting exposure to our older students and maybe avoiding altogether that exposure with our younger children. They can't do anything with it.
Christine,
John?
before we begin to segue into things, how we frame this for children, ways that are reassuring and developmentally appropriate, I wanted to just lay out some options for self-care. Not any particular techniques, but there are some major domains of self-care, because we are all, as we are different learners, we also have different styles of self-care. So for those of us who've studied, are you hearing that?
There's feedback.
A little bit of feedback.
All right, well, sorry. For those of us, and there are a number of us who studied yoga meditation for years, in traditional yoga, there are 4 different avenues for centering or for calming and silencing the mind. There is breathing, what they call pranayama, the actual use of the breath to calm the mind. There is visualization, creating certain guided images within yourself that puts you in a different frame of mind. There is something that you say or a sound that you make, whether you call it chanting or mantra or singing. It's the same thing, using a sound or a word or a song. And then there is body position, what they call asana, which is whether it's through certain creative movements or certain particular positions of the body, the position of the body can also change consciousness. So I would invite you, as you explore self-care for yourself, your staff, your parents, and of course the children, make sure people have lots of options as to how they self-care. I tend to be a verbal learner, so I do a lot of self-talk, but that may not work for a kinesthetic learner who needs to do more creative movement or body postures, or for a more visual learner who needs to make pictures in their mind to raise their consciousness. So just keep the bands of how you self-care wide. It shouldn't be too narrow. It's not just about breathing. There are many, many other techniques.
Thank you, John. So are we ready to start talking about the conversation? Kathy?
Can I first share a couple of comments, because we have asked people to comment and be interactive. So I'd like to include that now before we go too far down the road.
Great.
Michelle Kemp has shared with us. Hi, Michelle. Michelle
Hi,
was in.
Michelle.
So thanks for being here. I know it's, what is it, sometime in the middle of the night there. I am finding it very hard to feel so out of control. As a school head, I'm used to being responsible and being able to make choices about my school. Now I feel like I have no control. I do really appreciate all the resources you have shared. It helps so much to feel informed and aware. So Michelle, I think you're speaking for everyone. I think that this is really very much how we all feel. We're all doing something, because when you feel helpless, you have to do something, right? And so we're all trying to contribute and share in the best way that we can, and everyone will do that in their own unique way. Not alone. And I think that if we can share anything at all, it's that we're all here together, we're in it together, and we're here to support each other. This is not about a group of experts telling you things. This is about a community of people coming together to support each other and to share. And I can't emphasize that enough. So Michelle, I know that you are a very conscientious school leader, and we appreciate that. And I know that you will benefit from some of the resources we're sharing on how to take care of ourselves, so we can take care of others as well, and how to talk to the children, how to coach parents, and how to talk to the children too. So thanks for that. And there's a great book Brandy Allen is sharing with us by Kristen Neff, who many of you might know from PBS, right? That book is called Self-Compassion, and it's speaking very much to what we're talking about. So as we have a task force on the Montessori response team, the collaborative team. We have a task force that's working on just self-care for all the different constituencies. And so perhaps putting together a resource list of books might be a great thing for us to add to that. So we will add Kristen Neff's book as well. And she has some great podcasts as well. So I throw that out.
Kathy, can I just mention something for Michelle?
Sure.
You know, for those of us who've been or are school leaders, we tend to feel at this time a tremendous weight, you know, that we've got to take care of our people, which we do. The question is, who takes care of us? Some of the finest school leaders I know in normal times, let alone abnormal times, have created a little conscious support group for themselves. They literally have other people they know, whether it's spiritual leaders or other heads of schools, and they have worked out a kind of a prenuptial agreement. If I'm really stressed out, can I call you any time of the day or night? And you can call me. It's so important that heads of schools have some people that they can feel not alone in going through this, because it is a very lonely job to be a head of school. And I think everybody kind of needs a posse to lean on, you know, lean on me, because many heads of schools think they have to do this on their own, and that in these times, that's really can be fatal. I don't mean fatal physically, but I mean, it's not.
I think that's such a good point, John. And I know those of us on this call that are heads of schools have actively put those kinds of things in place to get support. And so we encourage other people to do the same thing, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need help. We're really good at connecting people. That's one of the things we do exceptionally well. So if you need someone or you want to be a resource for someone else, we can help make that happen. So that you can always email me about. But right now, I need 3 people helping me with my emails. So it's kind of the joke, but Kathy Leach at Montessori.org will eventually get to you. Okay, Carrie says, I've been having trouble staying asleep since last week. I've heard this so much. I've been on since the school closure.
Yeah.
It's time for me to really put self-care as a priority so I can serve my community. Again, thank you so much for sharing, because that really is what we have to take care of ourselves. And then quickly, Jacqueline DeSelm says, my husband and I have agreed only look at the news in the morning and then again after the kids go to bed. It's helped us feel a little better during the day. we have to hold each other accountable to this. It's not easy, but the alternative is higher anxiety. So thank you so much for sharing that. You know, it's not that we don't have to be informed. Of course we do, because we have to keep our communities informed. But if you watch it a lot, you see it's just the same thing over and over and over and over again. And every time you hear it, you know, it makes you even more anxious. So I think that's a great practice to share. Let's see. Really appreciate it. That there's a lot. Let's see. Emily Miller. There's a lot of pressure to provide for and keep everyone, children, parents, and staff, calm, supported, and appropriately responsive as a head of school. These are some of the challenges the heads of schools are facing. And she also says her sleeping patterns are the same as well. People are really struggling with this. So I think we can all identify. Baiju?
Right.
Can I say something to that one about making sure everyone stays calm? I think the only responsibility you really have is to keep yourself calm. And if you can really understand that you have no control over whether somebody else stays calm, you can influence, but you have no control over it. And there's a difference when you say, I have to keep others calm. That language, you just want to keep yourself calm is all I'm going to offer you. That's the only person you really can keep calm through this is you. And even that may not be possible at moments.
It's hard. It's hard. And that's a big enough job. And, you know, the interesting thing is calm is contagious. And so the more we are centered and calm in ourselves and our responses, both verbally and in our written responses, that they're thoughtful. And you can see the people who are responding even in emails in this heightened, you can feel it in the word. And so the more calm we keep ourselves, it really
All
is.
letters.
Yeah, it really is contagious. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Very much, Baiju.
You know, and it strikes me, Baiju, that, I mean, that is such wonderful advice. And how do we begin to put that in practice? And one of the ways that we can do that is something that Jonathan mentioned, and that's self-talk. And when you find yourself having that feeling of, I've got to take care of all these people, if you can begin to practice pairing that with, I can control myself, I can calm myself, and that will help calm others. That is a technique of taking that anxious feeling and pairing it with a calm feeling. And over time, it's practice. Over time, it will lead to you more automatically thinking in calmer terms.
And that self-talk, by the way, is really present tense. You know, whatever words you use, it's I is simply, these might not be your words. I am calm, I am capable, I am creative. You know, and no matter how one is feeling, one needs to reboot. It's really rebooting the consciousness, because the consciousness has drifted into some tense or dark or anxious space. And for those of us, it's a very present, no, this is who I am, this is what I am. It's very counterintuitive because you're not feeling that way.
You know, and I think the other thing oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to jump on Jonathan's comment about, you know, saying these things over and over to ourselves, using whatever mantra, words, songs, anything that helps us, because, you know, we're relaying this to other people. But also the fact that we have, even though we are responsible to so many people, we have to give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves, to put our own oxygen mask on first, as the saying continues to go, to reinforce to ourselves that taking care of ourselves is an investment in the people we're serving. Exactly. Because often, particularly women caregivers, often feel guilty, you know, for taking care of ourselves. And so, you know, I think it applies to everyone. I'm not excluding men, but I do think that that's something that we can think about. One of the things we have here is, you know, just managing all of the communication is stressful, right? Emily's sharing that. And Amy DeBrienza, says, I'm super concerned about two subgroups of students. One, kids are at home alone while parents are working, and two, kids whose parents have been laid off. and my employees who have kids at home and are still trying to work to provide for them. So,
Right.
you know, we see these subgroups of people that we're all trying to serve. You know, I think we can't meet everyone's needs. Our goal is to have everybody, you know, what's your circle of influence, right? We, right now, with the Montessori Foundation and the collaborative response team, we have a fairly broad reach. And we're appreciative of that reach, and we're appreciative of all the people who are helping us with that reach. And at the same time, we know that's one level. We're hoping to give you and model for you some things that then you push out to the next level of support. And then we model for the teachers, and we model for the parents, and we just continue to try to keep our scope realistic. We can't solve everybody's problems. We can't take care of everyone who's going to be laid off. We can't, as much
Right.
as I want to prevent I want not one Montessori school to close through this entire process. That's my goal. I don't think it's very realistic. And so I have to look at, I can only do what I can do. And I think if we can adopt that attitude that we are making a difference, we have to take care of ourselves, and then we'll be there for the next group of people. Baiju?
Right.
And also maybe in your heart have faith that everyone will find their way through this. There is a human resilience factor inside each of us. And when we can show faith, whether it's in the child or whether it's in the adult, that you have that resilience within you, even if it's our mind saying it to ourselves, you don't have to say it out loud to that person, but knowing inside that people have resilience, they're really strong, and they will get through these really tough times.
Yeah.
Thank you, Baiju. On the environmental side, just for a moment, one of the task forces that Christine and I serve on, along with Lorna McGrath, is the Parent and Family Support Group. And we're going to be starting some webinars like this on all the different configurations that may be going on within the family. Working parents there, working parents not there, younger children there with a caregiver, older children, you know, without people being there. So we're going to start to address that. So please keep an eye on some town hall meetings and webinars we're going to be doing on how do we work through different family lifestyle situations in this very abnormal time. That's coming up.
Right. So Tanya?
I think Tanya.
Also to the point of the looking at the past for understanding our resilience, we've seen in most of our lifetimes really critical epidemics and infectious diseases where people have come through it. I personally was extremely involved in the 1980s in the opioid epidemic, and I was on the abused children side of it. So there are agencies and organizations that are working in consort with what we are doing as a school that are trying to help children at all levels. And so our responsibility is to know the children we have at our own personal schools and know their family situations so that we can connect them to the services that will exist or already do exist. And that's part of understanding where the grandparents are, where the aunties are, and what's appropriate, because we have things in place both academically from an intellectual perspective, but boots on the ground too. I mean, there's a lot of people in different sectors that affect our children on a daily basis.
Right. Thank you all for that.
Can I help us redirect back?
Yes,
I
thank
think
you. You can do it or I can do it. Go ahead. Yeah.
telling me is that we need a separate webcast
Yeah.
just for the self-care of the school leaders and the educators. And so I will be happy to schedule more time for that conversation.
Yeah.
And perhaps we want to do that in a Zoom now that we have an expanded Zoom room, so that we can actually do some practices. And Baiju would love to have you lead us in some of those practices, Jonathan as well. And let's see if we can't support people with some regular self-care things that are scheduled for people to drop in once a week and get some of this.
Yeah, we can get that on the calendar really quickly.
Yes, we have a calendar. We're going to continue to send out.
Kathy, I'd like to weigh in for a moment or two.
Sure.
All of us realize we're in the middle of a very, very critical situation. You know, we're scared for our own family and our health our children's health, our loved ones' health. We're worried about the economy. We're worried about the politics of what seems to be happening around the world. Toilet paper can't be had for love of money. Getting into one of our Zoom meetings is a precious resource. I mean, it's really gotten silly. And we've got teachers who are probably the first to really feel a sense of overwhelm. We're starting to see that, I know, in our lab school as we work with our own staff, and we're seeing some of them are really navigating this well. Some are really feeling the stress and worrying about their paychecks and the future of the school. And then as time goes by, we're going to see more and more stress of the parents. We have lots of different balls in the air. We're trying to do a yoga pose, if you will, where we're balancing many different things. And I couldn't agree more with the importance of taking care of ourselves. I also want to remind us that one of the things that we have to be doing while we're dealing with our emotions and breathing in and breathing out is, one, remembering we will get through it. Two, we want to learn from the experience because, you know, Tanya, you were on the phone with Michael Bourne from the Virgin Islands where they got slammed by the 2 hurricanes. Michael was really good at preparing for the event before it happened. He was really good in managing it while it was happening. He was really good in the cleanup and the rebuilding of his community. All of us need to know that we're learning lessons through this. And those are both very personal, because it really starts with us, as Viju and everyone else are saying. And we're in the role of being empathetic, frightened leaders. I mean, our job is to lead. And part of our job as leaders is, one, take care of ourselves, because we're no good to anyone if we're falling apart. And we need to help our players to hold it together as best we can. As Viju said, we can't make them, but we've got to help them to remember that if they want to be part of this community, they need to somehow be scared, be upset, and get on the same page. Same thing with our individual families. They're probably going through their own turmoil. And if we're going to survive, it's going to be because they rediscover how important our school is in their family's life. And that's all about what we do and our teachers do to create that sense of community continuity. Back to you guys.
Okay. So many of you with us today are educators, it sounds like. And a lot of what we're talking about today is some ideas and some thoughts about how you might communicate to your parents, because we know that most of the children are at home. These kinds of conversations need to be had individually, ideally. I mean, if, you know, I know some of you are having live circle time every day with your students, and if it comes up, I think some of these suggestions can be helpful. But I also want you to keep in mind that these are things that you can share with the parents in your classroom, in your school, because you know them better than anybody, and that is a way of having a further reach for people, and taking the idea of, you can't make them do X, Y, or Z, but you can offer them opportunities, you can offer them ideas and suggestions to do that. So if we're ready to move on to talking about children, we want to start with infants and toddlers, just because that's where they start, right? The idea of co-regulating with infants and toddlers is extremely important. All of us who have worked with children know how gifted they are at taking on adults' feelings, of reading us. They get it in a way that they can't verbalize. But infants and toddlers in particular can take that on. So we're not going to have a conversation with a toddler about coronavirus, but we're going to watch for We're going to put some things in place preventively to help support those children. So we know that infants and toddlers are needing us to be more responsive than maybe we typically are, to helping them meet their needs. We might see toddlers who are crying more than usual, who are more clingy than usual. We might see some signs of stress. And again, with the idea of, there might be a part of us that goes, I've got work to get done. I can't have this kid clinging and crying. But the important thing right now is to attend to that so that you'll be able to do the things that you need to do. So we're not going to have a conversation with those children, but we're going to be aware of what their behavior is telling us. We're going to be as responsive to that as we can. It doesn't mean that we have to spend 24 hours a day with them. That's not realistic. And toddlers can do a lot of things on their own if we give them opportunity. So maybe they sit in the room with us, but the idea is to give them physical and emotional reassurance that they are going to be safe. We don't have to necessarily say it that way to them. But when we're talking about children, 2.5 and 3, and you know your child, you know your students, you know what they're ready for, okay? So this is very much developmentally based of, maybe you've gotten yourself ready and we're gonna sit down and, hey, sweetie, how about you and I just sit on the couch and have a conversation together? And you maybe start that conversation with not telling, but asking. So, have you heard about this sickness? Maybe with a 3-year-old. With an older student, you could say, so I'm thinking that you've heard about this coronavirus. Maybe you've overheard on the news. What questions do you have? What are you thinking about that? I'm wondering what you're thinking about that. And letting them share. And letting them share in a kind of deep listening sort of way that we oftentimes don't do, and that in the rush of our lives, we've maybe lost some of the art of that. But the idea of really being attentive, of making eye contact, if your child is comfortable with that, not all children are.
Just to contextualize that for just a moment, that really good point you made, I'm wondering that when adults are under the kind of stress that we're all under right now, you think there might be a tendency to cut the listening a little short and move to a didactic reassurance of the child way too quickly. Because
Yes.
we want to solve the problem for the child and solve the problem for ourselves. So I think if there's ever a time for reflective or active listening, really letting the child talk about what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, in whatever way they can, we need to give them the bandwidth to do that, because there will be a tendency to reassure them awfully quickly, which is not going to help them, and it actually won't help us either.
Exactly, and that's why we want to come at a place of having ourselves prepared before we have this conversation. If you are in a place where you're still feeling so anxious that you want to get to the solving it part, then you're not ready to have that conversation. So what I'm talking about is listening to your child's words, but also listening to the tone of voice, listening with sometimes they call it the third eye, listening with the third eye, where you're watching your child's body language. And what are they telling you? Particularly with an adolescent. Adolescents might tend to, I'm jumping around age ranges, but an adolescent might say, hey, I'm fine. I don't need to talk about this. But if their body is like this, then that's a pretty good sign. No, I'm scared. I'm going inside, So we want to read their body language. We want to read their voice tone. We want to be aware of the words that they're using. And that's what I mean by deep listening. Deep listening also means asking other questions. So if your child says, well, yeah, I've heard about this virus and I've heard lots of people have gotten sick, instead of you jumping into the, well, yes, that's right. Again, so what else do you know about that? Tell me more about that. What else are you thinking?
Christine, I think Baiju had something she wanted to share on.
Okay.
Yeah, I also want to be careful. Like when we say we want to sit down and talk to you, some children, and you all as parents or as teachers know each child well, much better than I'm going to know any of those children, right? So some children will respond better just when you're cooking side by side or you're working on a project and they may not be able to make that eye contact. And it's easier to have that distraction in front of them while they're talking to you about something so emotional than sitting down. And then there's going to be that child that loves to sit down right with you, eye to eye, and is going to talk to you. So know your child for sure. And also be sure that you're asking what they're feeling about it. They may not be
Yeah,
able
that
to
was,
tell you, but we want to be curious about it. Is that the next thing you were going to say, Christine?
yeah.
Sorry. Sorry.
It's great. Great minds think alike, Viju. Yeah, yeah. So the idea that we're doing this listening to that first question, I wonder what you know about this, and I wonder what you're thinking about this, and then reflecting with them about that, of letting them know, maybe it's something as simple as, well, I heard you saying, am I understanding you? Now, obviously, you're going to adapt this for the age of the child, and as Viju says, the place. You know, it might be my own daughter's favorite time to talk was when it was time to go to sleep, and we were actually, in her bedroom together and had just finished the bedtime story, and now the floodgates open. Okay, that's your time to talk. That's when we're going to talk. But this idea of reflecting, to make sure that you understood and giving them the opportunity to say more. John?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, again, I keep on looking at this through the window of adult stress and how we may not become good observers any longer, whether we're a teacher or in this case, a parent. So let's pretend we're looking at our child in our home who is happily engaged and not showing any emotional or behavioral symptoms of stress. It's like, do we really need to talk about the coronavirus with this age child? Because the child is not manifesting either the curiosity about it, they're not asking questions or talking about it, and they are seemingly happily engaged emotionally, socially, with their hands, with their minds. It's like, let's not superimpose our need to talk about this because of our stress. Let's, as Montessori said, follow the child.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
that's great. So let's talk about some of the signs that we might see that say a child 3 to 5 might need to have that conversation. Okay. You might see some regressive behaviors in a 3 or 5-year-old. You might see, something like your child starts wetting the bed all of a sudden. The child starts sucking their thumb all of a sudden. And maybe they did that when they were little, but they haven't done it in a long time. Your child is more clingy. Your child wants to be with you all the time or be touching you all of the time. A big sign that your child would need to talk is, yes, you have to have that ability to observe peace, and maybe that's a whole other webcast. Maybe is how do we get back to the place where we can observe children? But you're overhearing the child's self-talk in their play, or you're overhearing conversations between two of your personal children, the siblings, and some of the things that they're saying are indicating to you that this is on their mind in some way, that they have heard some of this. You may observe your child as more aggressive or more defiant. You also might observe that the child's more withdrawn. Those would be some signs that you would look for, say in a 3 to 5-year-old, that might give you I need to figure out how to have this conversation. And I think Vaju's point is really well taken. Where that conversation takes place is going to vary from child to child. It might be that you're on your one trip a week to the grocery store and your child is sitting in the back seat, and that's when you start hearing whatever is coming out. But looking for those behavioral signs, reading your child's behavior as communication is so important right now. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we're sitting on a couch, okay? Even though we've all agreed it can happen any place. So you've asked the child what they are wondering about, what questions do they have, and then, so how are you feeling about that? And letting them express their feelings. Now, for a young child, we as Montessorians, we all laugh, right? 3-year-olds are happy, sad, or mad. And sometimes if we introduce it to them, they'll say scared. It may be that you'll have to, with a younger child, a reluctant adolescent, it may be that how are you feeling about that? And you're not hearing a response after a little bit. And well, can I share with you how I've been feeling about it? And see if you can get a conversation going that way. But then again, we want to go through that same cycle of asking a question, listening to the response in a really deep way, asking follow-up questions, reflecting what we're hearing the child say, and then when we're talking about feelings in particular, validating that feeling. I hear that you're really frightened. I understand that. That is a hard place to be. You know, I've been feeling scared some myself. Expressing that empathy and letting your child know that whatever they're feeling, it's okay. It's easier when we know a child is scared, it's easier to respond to that with empathy. If your child says, yeah, I'm really angry, I don't get to go to school, I don't get to see my friends, I can't go out and play anymore, it's a little bit harder to empathize with anger. But that's a very valid feeling. And if your child, and when I say child, I mean 0 to 18, if your child is expressing some of those feelings that might be harder for you to deal with, try to the best of your ability to validate that is a valid feeling. And I think lots of us are feeling angry right now. Baja, did you want to add something to that?
No, I oftentimes
Okay.
if they don't have the social emotional language, you can show pictures of those faces. And instead of saying, even just try to keep drawing forth is my goal during those difficult conversations, especially if you're already seeing behaviors. And so to ask those questions, to just keep drawing forth, I guess, is really the key here. If you can keep asking open-ended curiosity questions.
And I think Christine also raised a really good point. Some children will open up when they hear that the adults are having a common experience. So I think in an appropriate way, without sharing too many of our internal stress details, you know, I've been feeling really scared about this too, you know, and this is what I've been thinking. So I think showing our humility and our humanity is sometimes helps children feel safe enough to open up.
Absolutely.
Finding that balance between being vulnerable and being assuring.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Yeah, I would just, I'm going to say that often, similar to what Baiju was saying, often children don't have the language to tell you how they're feeling. And when they're asked that direct question, it's sort of like intimidating to them, puts them into a little bit of panic. And often it's just a matter of us stopping and tuning in. And sometimes just the quiet, the child will start talking, right? It's sometimes just the quiet times, not the direct ask, where they feel like there's enough space. So often I find children don't feel like they have the space to get their words in edgewise, even because we're like controlling it all and running the show. And so I want to emphasize that sometimes it's the quiet, the solitude, and the opportunity children have, which I think is, Christine, you mentioned how your daughter decided at bedtime was the time. What was the time that finally things were settled down enough? I know people have told me their children speak the most in the car if all the devices are off. That's when these big conversations happen. Now, we're not going to be in our cars so much right now, but I want to share that Margaret Whitley, and Margaret, thanks for being here today. We're happy to see you. She says, great point about knowing your child. Going for a drive or a walk in the woods if possible and casually talk, but don't look them in the eye and make them feel that this is even more serious, right? So if we're acting out of character, it might even alarm them. So, you know, it's really, as you've both said, about just knowing your child. Some children want to talk nonstop, and you have to almost like read between the lines of what they're really saying. Other children will express it through their behaviors. One of the things that I know for all age children and for us as adults is that our routines and our rituals and our things that bring us the stability are the things that are going to help provide some comfort as well. If we can keep certain things the same, those are the invisible things that create some sense of everything's going to be okay. right?
Right.
That I know I grew up in a chaotic household. And when I would go to my grandmother's house, it was like, oh my God, because she set the table for breakfast right after dinner every day. Like, who does that? But I knew I could count on it. If the breakfast table was set before I went to bed, everything was good with the world. So I think there's something to, it's a silly story, but you know, as an adult, I think about myself as a grandparent, and what I can provide for my grandchildren is that you can count on, when you come to my house, things are always going to be the same. The novelty is good, and we are all out of sorts. Nothing's the same.
Right.
What can we
So
keep?
go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just want to mention that, you know, I had to do this in my classroom sometime. I wasn't always successful as an early childhood teacher, but I'm wondering at this time, when we're trying not to superimpose our needs on children, but really observe and follow their needs, whether it be helpful as we're about to interact with children, whether it's a group of children or our children in our home, to ask, am I seeing and supporting the children's needs, or am I trying to meet my own needs? You know, just kind of speed bumping ourselves with some introspective question. Is this about my emotions and my stress that I need to talk about this? Or is this really something that I'm observing in the child's demeanor, body language, behavior? Like, am I really following the child, or am I following my own personal and valid needs, but not necessarily good for the child?
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to add one thing to what Kathy said. Kathy said about, you know, giving them time and space to really say more. And I think we forget, especially young children, their processing speed is much slower than ours. And so when we do ask a question, remember that they're not processing at our adult speed. They're on their own time frame. And we often rush through these, especially because we don't really want to have this conversation. Let's just be honest. Most of us could, if we could avoid it, we would. So we're trying to get through it as quickly as possible sometimes. And to just be aware that that's what we're trying to do can give the child some space to really do it. Their processing speed is slower, and that's, yeah.
Great point.
Kathy, do we have any participants who wanted to?
Yeah, I just
jump
want to
in?
remind everyone that they can go ahead and put some things in here, and I do have a couple of comments, so I'll jump to that. This is Jamie Bowditch. Says, my son, who is 6 years old, always has talked to me about stuff at school, in the bath, or in the shower. This was the time that he was calm, and the routine is always the same. So in this time of crazy, the bath has especially become the place of calm. Hey, for me too. I have to say, there's just a certain amount of like comfort that water and routine bring to us.
Right.
Thanks for that. And I want to go to Margaret. Margaret also put a comment in earlier I'd like to get to now. She says, great point. Oh, wait a minute. This is the other one. She's in Canada, and she ran a school for many years. She says, our Canadian Council of Montessori Administrators community used to jokingly refer to our red phone friends, and we tried to make sure we all knew we could call and who could call us when they needed support. Although no longer ahead of school, I am regularly getting emails and calls even today, and I'm grateful I can offer that support. When she was ahead of school, I intentionally tried to set aside time in the day or the week to create space in my head to be better able to serve others when I was serving. I tried hard to keep those parameters, and in turn, people started to do the same for themselves. Again, part of that modeling and sort of what I would call the contagious sort of entrainment. As we calm down and provide space, people sort of get in sync with that. It changes their heart rhythms, their respiration. There's physiological changes that happen when we're in the presence of people who choose calmness. Thank you, Margaret.
So I'd like to offer a technique that you can begin to develop and begin to practice. And if you really truly don't want to have this conversation, this would be a good technique that you could use in the midst of this conversation. And that's the mantra: stop, think, and choose. And I teach this to children, but it works beautifully for adults as well. So that listening piece is a chance for us to stop ourselves so that we can really listen. The reflection piece is a place where we can kind of process what the child is saying by asking the child, did I hear you the way I wanted to hear you? And then, as John and Kathy talked about, the idea of whose needs are being met here, and what is it that this child is telling me that they need right now, and we can choose which one of those needs are we seeing. But when we create that kind of gap moment for ourselves, where we don't have to respond, we don't have to say something, do something, we can stop. Then there's a gap, because if we're so keyed up, we're not really thinking straight. So consciously, intentionally, just stop. Have the gap so that you can think, what is going on here? What am I seeing? What is this child telling me? Take another gap so some ideas will come to you. But one of the, a couple of different ideas, different directions that you can go, depending on what you're seeing and what the words and the behavior of the child are communicating to you. Maybe what your child is communicating is that they just need a big hug. That's all they're ready for right now. And, but maybe you're getting the sense that, well, maybe we could move forward and talk about some of the facts of what's going on right now. With a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, it might be, well, there are people who are getting sick, and the adults are all working together to make sure that we all stay healthy, and we're working together in our family to stay safe. And that kind of conversation can move into giving your child a sense of control. We feel out of control, and it doesn't feel good, right? Our children feel out of control too, and they may not even know why they feel out of control. Giving them a sense of control by giving them some, here's a Montessori jargon, meaningful work. And I don't mean schoolwork. I mean, well, how about, one of the things that I read about this sickness is that if we keep our hands clean, and we wash our hands lots of times a day, that's one of the ways that we as a family can stay healthy. So would you like to plan with me? Let's look at the day and let's think about what times a day are we going to wash our hands? And do you want to wash your hands by yourself, or should we wash our hands together? How do you want to do that? And get your child involved in planning how that's going to happen. Maybe you talk about how important it is that we, even though our hands are clean, now we need to keep them away from our face. Now, I'm reverting to using a tone that I would use with early childhood, because many of my years in Montessori are early childhood. But with an older child, even still, I wonder if you and I could come up with some ways that we can help each other. Because what I've heard, what I've read, is that we automatically touch our face something like 15 times a minute or something. Can you believe that? Let's you and I, maybe we can come up with a signal. And if we forget, and that's okay, but if we forget, I'll give you a signal. What kind of signal do you want? And here's the signal I'd like from you. And we can help each other that way. You're engaging your child in the meaningful work of how are we in our family unit at home going to feel a sense of control. Certainly having the routines, having the schedules, but being flexible with them. One of the things that Vajra and John and I have talked about is having a regular family meeting. And maybe you plan those meetings. Maybe you're going to, we're going to have a meeting on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after we get the dinner dishes cleared up. And we're going to sit down as a family and we're going to check in with each other. And we're going to talk about what we know and what our questions are and how we're feeling about this. And just have a chat. I mean, you can call it a family meeting, but just have a chat. Vajra?
Yeah, one of the best ways to begin the family meeting, and one of the ways to, especially with elementary and older age children, they sometimes don't want to come to a family meeting because oftentimes family meetings has been around, okay, you've screwed up, so we're going to have a meeting about, right? So
Right.
A lot of children are reluctant to come, and one of the best things to just start with are acknowledgments to each other. so that children want to come. And Jane Nelson, I love her to pieces, and Positive often suggests have dessert when you're having this meeting. Have it be something that you're doing that's fun, because then they're, if you're having a chocolate chip cookie, it's hard to be really that angry about things, So to have that so that it's kind of the incentive, if you will, and it makes the mood a little bit lighter as we're going to be talking about this. So giving acknowledgments is a great way to begin, even before we get to that deep stuff,
I'm so glad you brought up the acknowledgement thing, because I think there would be a tendency, because of the need to make connection, the need for everybody to de-stress, to constantly be focused on the, here's the work we're doing, or here's the issue at hand. And I think we could just call this unconditional gratitude or unconditional, appreciation. Children, if anybody needs people coming to them and going, have I told you how much I love you? Have I told you how happy I am you're part of our family or part of our classroom as a teacher? Catching, if there was ever a time to catch children doing something right, did you see, Baiju, that you were able to do that all by yourself today? That was so helpful for our family. Thank you. We need to counterbalance the stress of what's going on with more and more communications of love and gratitude. And that, again, is very counterintuitive given the kind of stress we're undergoing. It's almost a meditative discipline. Who do I need to thank today? Starting with the children.
And I'll just say this, it's not the blanket good job. It's not the blanket good job. And we really, I know most of us here are Montessorians, but we really need to step aside and really be evaluative about it.
I even hesitate to refer to it as a family meeting, because it has a formality to it that can be intimidating to both parents and to children. It really is just, we're just checking in with each other as a family. Now is a time when we're spending lots of time together. And maybe it's even a time to say, we've never spent so much time together. And, I got to tell you, there are times when I'm finding it really hard. But look at what we can do together. Maybe we can go for a walk together. And I read a post the other day on Facebook about bringing back board games. And, just play. We've kind of forgotten that art of just how to sit down and talk. So this is more like we're going to sit down as a family. And, in building on what you're saying, John, the most important thing that we can give to our children right now is reassurance. This is an adult problem. This is an adult responsibility. It is not their responsibility. We want their help. We want to involve them in it. They are a valued, important part of the family. There's a difference between pitching in, essentially, and being a cohesive family group, all working together on a common goal and taking responsibility for problems. We're not asking them to do that, but they need lots of reassurance.
Very good, Christine.
Thank you. So letting our children know how much we love them, letting them know how much we appreciate that they picked up the damp towel off the floor when they got out of the bathtub and we had this heavy duty conversation, and they put it in the hamper. And doing that in like Viju was saying, not good job, but I like the way you picked up the wet towel and you put it in the hamper. Thank you so much. That was great.
Well, and even though we're focused on children and supporting children and families, does that principle also apply to school leaders in terms of giving gratitude and appreciation to the teachers and the staff and the office staff and to parents? This is the time where people need to really share how much I value you in our family, in our school, in my classroom. And so I think this idea of appreciation is a tremendous counterbalance to the stresses we're all facing.
And can I flip that too and say, if you were an educator who is on this call, thank your school leader for being the school leader.
Thank you. Yeah.
Happy?
I have a couple of comments I would love to go ahead and share.
Okay.
So let's see. This we will get to, I know, but I want to bring it back up again. You mentioned signs of stress in toddlers and primary children. We're looking for those more signs of stress for the elementary students and perhaps adolescents. And then going back to, we talked about, I think Baiju brought up processing speed. The children aren't, processing at the same rate. Either a request that you have of them or a question that you have. And Margaret says, not only is their processing speed slower, but we have been thinking about this 24/7. They have not. This may also be true even with a few others. We can't assume others to be in the same place and space we are.
Yep.
So because points to hear them clearly and not hear ourselves is important. So Margaret, no apologies necessary. You're apologizing for contributing. This is what we want. We love you. We'd hope you can be on a panel soon because you have a lot to share as well. So please, if you have any bandwidth to do a Wednesday webcast with us again, we'd love to have you on this very topic. I also have Diana Romero. I have a great communication with my boy, and I'm happy he's always open to talk and express. But right now I'm facing the fact that me and my husband are losing our jobs. So now I'm stuck on how to manage and talk to the fact of the internal crisis as well as the world crisis.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I already said your name. She asked me not to say her name. Okay. So
We all
sorry.
forgot it.
Yeah, and then Jonathan, a very special suggestion. Thank you. I feel like the language of stay healthy is important to use instead of feel safe. When this is over, we don't want the children to feel that going out of their house and returning back to school is unsafe. We think of safe as danger, obstacles, people. I have heard people interchange the terms. I would suggest we use the word healthy. Thank you for that reminder.
Like that. I like.
There's a request for the mantra's words. Was that Jonathan's mantra he talked about? Jonathan, you talked about telling yourself every day those things.
Yeah, what was it? I know it was capable and creative. What was the first one?
Um,
Oh,
Yeah.
But I think for a mantra to really be beneficial for you, it needs to be your own mantra that
I was just going to say that.
that works for
It has to
you. I
resonate.
mean, I have a mantra that's in another language.
Yep.
And I have found over the years that that's what works for me. It's in a different language. I would never in a million years suggest it to someone else because it's my private. And so, it's about kind of the self-talk, but it's not like having a big old conversation. It's just quick little, like the stop, think, choose that I mentioned. It's quick. It's a in the moment when we're feeling all the things that we're feeling in the moment, having a quick go-to.
actually, Christine, I want to just do a couple of counterpoints to that. The counseling that I've done at times, it's like you do it in the moment when one is drifting into stress or negativity and anxiety, but it can also be preventive medicine. You do it first thing in the morning when you wake up and just before you go to bed when your subconscious mind is really open, or when you do your meditation. So there's a preventive side to these practices, whether it's breathing, visualization, or or self-talk. And then I've noticed myself drifting. I'm going to bring myself back with that.
Yeah.
And I think that we can help our children develop some of that kind of language. Again, to bring up my own daughter, who has her whole life had some difficulties with anxiety, I suspect from sensory processing disorder, but that's a different topic. And in the language that we developed to use, the term that we used from the time she was very, very young was, you're spinning into the hole. And she knew that spinning into the hole meant that if that it was time to recalibrate, essentially, so that she didn't get to a dark place. So even that, we can help our children come up with, I see your hand, Baiju, even helping our children at this time come up with some words that they would like to use when they are feeling X, Y, or Z, and trusting that, we can really trust kids if we give them the chance, even really, really little ones. You can trust them that they will come up with some solutions that'll be like, wow, I never would have thought of that. Baiju?
Yeah, I wanted to go back and answer the question about elementary and signs of stress, because we seem to have just skipped over it. So
Yeah, we were
from
going to
my
get back to it, but go ahead. Yeah.
from my experience, and I'm just going to name a few. One of the things obviously is still like getting angry, super angry about things that would not make them angry before, super sad about things that wouldn't make them, they might start biting their nails. And one thing with elementary, they're really social beings, and now they're being isolated. And I think we really need to attune to that. So if they can find a way to connect at least online with a friend, FaceTime, they are really into that social, their social needs are not being met right now. Neither are mine, by the way, but so we just need to remember that they also have that need. And I worry about them because they're, and our adolescents, because they are so social and they're becoming isolated. I really hope that they don't turn to their video games, etc., because of that. So yeah, it's a concern that I have, and I think we need to be aware of it.
I think you bring up an important point with that too, which is how can we engage our elementary age and our adolescent students in a conversation about that explicit, let's talk about it. This is a time when all of us are missing being around our people. And let's you and I brainstorm some ideas how you can spend some time with your friends and still stay healthy. You know, we had a person on one of our town halls recently who said that I think she was 9-year-old daughter came up with the idea, presented it to him, and said, my friends and I are going to start a Zoom chat, and we're going to get together every day, and we're going to do stuff. You know, and maybe they even let them come up with it, but maybe they even come up with some structure. I could see a group of elementary students engaged in a project-based learning, where they come up with a topic that they're interested in. They each go off on their own computers into computer land, and then they come back together, and this one found this, and this one found this, and this one found this, and maybe then they kind of generate, well, what are we going to do with all this? You know, there's so many things they can do to stay connected.
And there's ways for them to be service oriented still, even though we're so isolated. I think service orientation for that age group, especially elementary onwards. I'm hearing about, you know, they can write notes to people in nursing homes. They can, you know, send, you know, people are collecting letters and cards, etc. And that's one small way we can make a difference. So I think, again, going back to that meaningful, purposeful work, that could be their purposeful work. And I think we need to understand that that elementary age student needs not only connection, but service orientation and meaningful work, and they can tie them all together. I'm sure they'll come up with better ideas than I can ever come up with. I know this for certain, but we need to give the problem to them to come up with the answers.
And and give them the time.
And time to come up with it, yep.
Yeah, John, you were going to say something?
The only thing I would add is, just as we try to do in a Montessori classroom, if there is a way, even at distance, for elementary and adolescents to be able to do some of the research as to what the community need is, whether it's in the neighborhood or the nursing home. Sometimes when we give them a project, like, well, you could write letters to people in an assisted living home. Now we're superimposing. We've skipped over the step of letting them discover there's a human need.
Correct. Agreed.
Exactly. And there is a lot of need now with so many people being laid off. You know, anybody who works in a restaurant or a bar in Colorado is out of work. Anybody who works for a ski resort is out of work. You know, I heard a report just this morning about the food banks in Denver are getting cleared out because they usually get donations from larger chains, and the chains are being bought out, and so they don't have the donations to make the food bank. I mean, so there's any number of gazillions of things. So getting back to the signs of stress, like how do we know, Kathy? Go ahead. I saw your hand.
Finish that part, and then I've got a couple other comments. Go ahead.
Okay. So basically, if you notice changes in your child, that's a sign of stress. Changes that worry you, not if your child has decided that now they're going to do the laundry. That, you know, like celebrate that.
Well, but maybe changes, not also. Maybe not also. If they're trying
depends on the child, I guess.
That's a way to control. I can make you happy with me. I'm going to take care of that, and that also. I'm watchful of any changes.
That's, I mean, again, in the context of it's so important to know your own child, and that being able to see, not just look, but to see your child and what your child is telling you. So with infants, crying more than usual, withdrawing, being really clingy, not wanting to play with toys that they've been playing with. With 3 to 5-year-olds, we might see some aggressive behaviors. With them, you can really listen into the play that they're doing, and they will act out what's worrying them in their play. Change in eating and sleeping habits in your child. At all ages, not toddlers, but 3 to 19, physical complaints. If they start having a lot of physical aches and pains, it's not typical for them, then that might be a sign that, hey, let's have a chat about this. With adolescents and and again with elementary students, having a harder time concentrating, having a harder time paying attention, hearing you when you ask something or you say something that maybe they're kind of off thinking about something, or they're just not attending in the same way. And with an adolescent, certainly the tendency to deny that they have feelings, and they're not going to talk to an adult about them if they do have them. So that I don't want to talk, being kind of defiant in a way that they are not typically adolescent defiant, a new kind of defiant. So those are some changes to kind of look at.
And destruction.
Yeah. I missed that, Vaiju. What was that?
Destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, destructive behavior. I mean,
Yeah.
it won't be uncommon to see destructive behavior right now. They're
Very
feeling
true.
hurt.
And one of
Yeah.
those forms of destructive behavior could be teasing, excessive teasing, or bullying.
Of
Because
another sibling. Yep.
second and third plane children can decapitate each other and try to decapitate adults because they've got the language ability. So any escalation of mean-spirited teasing or mean-spirited behavior is a sign of stress.
Right.
Well, and self-mutilation and depression.
Self-harm. Yep, self-harm, no doubt. All kinds of destruction.
Okay, I have a couple of things to share from our participants today. And first, and probably most important, is from Jeff Selhorst, who wants to be Jonathan. And
No, you don't.
I just say that we have to have a sense of humor. So he wants to use Jonathan's mantra. And I applaud that, Jeff. Thank you. So I needed that.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Jeff. If we can't laugh at ourselves and our predicament, we're in serious trouble. As you know, the human being is the only creature that apparently can laugh. Maybe the monkey kingdom can, but we can laugh.
Yeah. So I appreciate that, Jeff, very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
He also shares with a good.
Kathy, tell Jeff that he can come to my birthday party.
Oh my. He also shares the suggestions that of scanning emails, letters, and cards and artwork rather than mailing them right now. I know many nursing homes and facilities do not allow mail to come in right now.
Right.
And so these people aren't allowed to have visitors and no mail, right? If you have grandparents, parents out there who need this, great idea, scan it and get the nursing stations to let people have things. But anyway, I mean, not just this is for even for student to student, right? They can be doing some of this. And then we have lots of thank yous. Let's see, Margaret posted a website or a YouTube channel, which I shared with the group for a hand washing lesson that people had done. So thanks for sharing. Another suggestion for different verbiage with each other and the children is not social distance, but physical distance and socially connected.
Nice.
So I love that. Physical distance, social connection. Thank you. That's really brilliant. And this is why we need all of us kind of coming together to reframe it, right? You don't have to frame everything the way it's coming in and out of the news media and the health organizations. We can take that, reframe it so that it's in some sort of manageable way for all of us. We are coming to a close. I want to give people an opportunity to say a last few words. So I'm going to turn it back over to the panel, and then we will close with you, Christine. So we'll start from the other end to see if either Tim or Tanya wants to start with anything.
Can I just jump in real quick? There is a
Oh.
handout of kind of a review of what we've talked about. And if you want to access that, how do they do that, Kathy? They
Yes,
just download it? Just download it.
Thank you, Christine. It's at the bottom of your control panel. There's a little tab for handouts. If you click on that, you'll see a PDF. You just click on your PDF and you'll be able to, you can even drag it from there on my computer. You can just drag it into your folder. But otherwise, you can click on it and access that. And it has some of the tips that we've talked about today and some things for you to think about. So, Tanya, you want to go ahead?
I'm good. We're good. Thanks.
Thank you. We're wishing you a lot of, we're here to support. Tanya's working in the trenches of the school. We all have to work towards the lab school. So like I said, we're in the same boat. Tim, did you have something you wanted to add?
I think you all did a wonderful job. I kept jumping in and off because people kept going to the Zoom location. And I had to keep telling them this is the place you wanted to be.
Yeah.
Clearly, people like
Thanks, Tim.
Zoom a lot.
Well, now that we've upgraded the account, we should be in business, right?
Yeah, we may start using that regularly for these kinds of meetings. The long and the short of it is, if you don't take care of ourselves and the people we love, we're not going to be of much use to the children we teach or the school that we run. This is a time that is trying, as they say, tries men and women's souls. It's a really important time to stay calm, stay positive, and try to lower the tension in your own life, lower the tension in the lives of your people, and remember, it's really tangible expressions. The schools that make it through will be the schools that stay calm, that somehow or another make the time to get the players of the school to keep in communication with parents, not communicate fear, listen a lot, provide continuing program experiences, which is what a lot of people really are begging for. You know, what do we do on Monday? And that's not as important as the fact that you are in communication. You have a plan, and that as a teacher or as a head of school, you're in communication and you're not sounding like you're about to blow your brains out. We need to be calm and get through this together. We're going to make it.
Thanks, Tim. How about Jonathan?
Yeah, I'd like to share a 1-minute story. Some of you know this story, but it's about being present and sort of being adaptive to the situation. So there were two, some of you know this, it's called A Muddy Road Story. Two Zen monks were walking along on a very rainy day heading to their temple in Japan or China, and they came to an intersection that was just like knee deep in mud. And across the intersection was this very beautiful young woman in a kimono, and she could not negotiate the intersection. So the older monk walks across and says, come on, my friend. And he picks the young lady up in his arms and carries her across the intersection. And the two monks continued on their way. And in the evening, they got to their temple, and the younger monk could no longer restrain himself. And he turns to the older monk who helped the young lady and said, we've taken vows of celibacy. We're not supposed to look at women, let alone touch them. Why would you do that? And the older monk said, I left that young lady back there. Are you still carrying her? So if there's ever a time for breaking out of old, rules of thinking and adapting to the needs of people in the situation, there may be somebody across the muddy road that we need to help.
There you go.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I think that applies to many, many parts of our life, not just this particular crisis. Yeah.
A good one.
Baiju?
I just want to say thank you so much. I'm humbled to be here. There's some great voices here, some great thinking from the comments from everybody. So just a lot of gratitude, and stay healthy, everyone.
Yeah.
Really hope that you all stay healthy and stay connected.
Thank you, Baiju.
Very nice.
Thank you.
And then Christine, and then I have a couple of comments I'll share, and then we'll be on our way.
I think as many things that are different, there are many, many things that are the same. The things that are the same are the way that we feel about each other, the way that we can work with one another and support one another and be with one another. And I've heard the term silver linings used several times in the last few days, and trying to keep that in mind. The silver linings here are very, very numerous if we look for them. And I too echo your gratitude, Viju. I'm so glad that you were here today, and I'm so glad that I get to work with these amazing people that are on right now. And all of you whose faces I can't see, thank you for everything that you are doing for yourselves, for your children, for your families, and we'll see you soon. We're going to do more of this.
Thanks for facilitating the discussion, Christine.
Yeah, pretty much every day we'll be seeing you. If you want to see us, we'll be here. And we have many, many thank yous. So I want to express that to the panel. Many thank yous. One particularly, thank you so much for this amazing panel. IMC for your amazing leadership and support, and the conscientiousness of our whole Montessori community is striving toward. That's from Margaret, and thank you. Those are very wise words. We appreciate you and our Montessori community. We really, this is a part of an evolution, and life will certainly be different on the other side of this crisis. I, for one, am looking forward to that. So we will see you all soon. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll get more topics and meetings out very, very quickly. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Okay, I've turned the recording off, and people are still on and can hear us. I always like to remind you of that, but I do thank you so much. And Viju, I'd love if you have opportunity and time that you could join us on a couple of other things. So I know you're working, I think, with Christine and John on the self-care topic. So we're looking at doing some regular Zooms just on that topic.
Okay.
To help all of our adults take care of themselves. And I think you have a lot to offer. I know you do. I'd love to have you involved in that. So
I'm honored.
Me too. Thank you so much. We're going to jump off to the next, we have another meeting.
All right, we'll see you.
Okay,
Be in touch,
see
I'll
you.
touch base with you right after your meeting at 3:30. Let me know when you're available.
Okay, and just shoot me texts when you need stuff done.
I'm trying.
Okay, good. I'll see ya. Bye.
All right. Bye.
See ya.